How's it going, guys? And welcome back to the Horror Basement. My name's Shane, and welcome to the first video of the classic horror review series, where I'll be taking you through the 50 horror movies of the Treeline 50 Horror Movie Pack. And the first one we have on the docket here is The Amazing Mr. X from 1948. Now, this movie starts with our main character, Christine, and her younger sister, Janet, getting ready for date night. And while they're doing their hair and fixing their makeup, they give us a nice, convenient exposition dump where we learn a few things about what's going on in Christine's life, namely that her husband, Paul, died about a year ago in a car accident, and that her new love interest, Martin, who's a lawyer, has been proposing to her, and she's been rebuking his proposals because she still feels an attachment to Paul. So Janet leaves, and Christine decides to walk down the beach to essentially meet Martin for their date. And on the beach, she runs into a mysterious tuxedoed man who we later learn is the psychic or medium known as Alexis. Now, he essentially says that with his help, Christine can get in contact with Paul, from the afterlife or whatever, and get closure and that kind of thing. So he gives her his business card, and she ends up canceling the date with Martin and later going to see Alexis at his home. Now, one of my favorite parts of the movie is Alexis' house. I kept comparing it to like a Scooby-Doo castle, because he has all these like trick two-way mirrors and basically little cubby holes he can hide in so he can pop out and look like he's magic. And the movie goes to great lengths to let you know that this dude is a complete like grifter and huckster, and that all of his, mystical powers are just basically him trying to trick rich women who he stalks to get information on out of all their money, which is what he's doing to Christine, because, by the way, she's loaded. Like, most of this movie takes place, if not at Alexis's little Scooby-Doo trick house bungalow, it takes place in Christine's like palatial mansion where her and Janet live. So the movie progresses from there, and Christine is becoming more and more dependent on going to these seances with Alexis, to where Martin, her boyfriend, or the guy who's trying to get her to marry him, and Janet, her sister, both get concerned, and they decide to hire a private investigator to see if this Alexis guy is legit. Now, for some unknown reason, unknown to everyone, including the makers of this movie, the private investigator they hire is able to do magic tricks. And this whole scene where the three of them are talking, he's just like doing card tricks and making a cigar appear and disappear in his hand, which this never comes up later. Like, this private investigator does end up in Alexis's house and is completely unable to figure out any of Alexis's trick chairs and all the crap he uses to make the spookiness happen. But the three of them put their heads together, and their initial plan is to have Janet pose as another rich socialite and go to see Alexis. And this is one of the biggest plot holes I think I saw in the movie, was that the private eye should have realized that in stalking Christine, Alexis would already know who Janet is and what she looks like. So when they try this, that's exactly what happens. Alexis realizes, oh, that's Christine's sister. And then, for some reason, she thinks that him knowing that is, like, proof he's a psychic. And also, he, like, puts the charm on her. And she goes from hating this dude's guts and wanting to bust him to immediately being in love with the psychic. And that's going to come into play later in the story. So from there, Alexis, realizes that he has both of these siblings. So he pretty much starts gaslighting them both and kind of playing them against each other. And this culminates in them both, like, driving over to his house at the same time and barging in. And just to kind of prove he's legit, they decide to have a seance. Now, Christine and Janet are sitting there, like, holding hands. It's in the dark, normal, like, seance stuff. But Alexis, to prove he's, like, #1 best psychic, has them tie him up and lock him in a box. Now, the trick is that there's a false back to the box, and Alexis basically, like, the chair slides through, and he's in this other room, like, turning knobs and working all these basically parlor tricks. You see, hands playing the piano and faces floating around, but it's really just basic Alexis running around the room in this black, like, bodysuit so that they can't see him. And that's when Martin and the PI, Mr. Magic Trick, pop in. And just before they can bust up the seance, Alexis manages to get back into position so that when they open the box, he's still tied up in there. And basically the PI fails to debunk any of the stuff that he would probably in real life be able to. But they basically strong-arm Alexis and say, like, oh, well, let's all 5 of us sit here, and then you make the ghosts appear while we can watch you. And just as they're all sitting down to do the seance, and you can tell Alexis is, like, sweating through his velour leisure suit, being like, how am I going to actually make, because ghosts aren't real. The shape of Paul, like, appears in a doorway and starts talking to Christine, and then once the guys jump up and give chase, he runs off. And everyone, including Alexis, is just shocked. So they're all like, wow, that was a crazy seance. And then they leave, and Alexis is sitting there, like, smoking a cigarette and drinking, because he's confused about what happened. And then the actual non-ghost Paul just kind of walks up and is like, hey, buddy, pretty cool what I did there, huh? And Alexis is like, what's going on? And then Paul gives another exposition dump where we learn that it turns out he wasn't a good husband. He's actually a piece of shit that was murdered his first wife, and that's whose body was in the burnt-out car, for her money. And now that he's back from the dead, but not officially, legally, he plans to use Alexis to do the same thing to Christine. Basically, they want to murder Christine and have Alexis marry Janet so they can have all of the family's money. And Paul makes it a big point to say, like, and since I'm dead, I can't be convicted of murder, so if you mess with me, I'm gonna murder you. So what their genius plan, is to basically have Paul camp out in the basement of Christine's, like, mansion, and while Christine is, like, laying there hysterical in bed, Paul is talking to her in, like, a ghost voice that's being pumped through a hidden speaker that they put in the fireplace, so that while Christine's alone, the ghost of Paul can talk to her. And this goes on for a bit where it's not really clear if they're drugging Christine or if she's just at her wit's end because this is the 40s and she's hysterical because she's a woman. But, by and by, Janet finds the speaker and goes down to the basement and discovers that Paul's not really dead. So he's like, fuck it. I'm just going to shoot her. And Alexis takes offense to this because in the meantime, he has actually fallen in love with Janet, not just fake fallen in love. So Paul's like walking at her with the gun, and Alexis grabs his arm and does like a sick, nasty judo flip. And they start doing like the bad 1940s fighting, to where cocking back and thwapping each other. But so they do bad John Wayne style fighting for a bit, and then they both go for the gun, and Paul gets it and shoots Alexis once in the stomach, and then gives chase upstairs to where Christine and Janet are. And just as he's about to like blow them both to smithereens, Alexis gets on the intercom that's hidden in the fireplace, is like, "Oh, you can't kill me, Paul. I'm actually a ghost now." And in the meantime, Alexis, like clutching his stomach, is putting on his black morph suit that he used earlier. So basically Paul runs back down into the basement to probably double tap Alexis to shut him up. But it's dark and he can't see Alexis, and Alexis is hiding in the shadows and like throwing wine bottles at him, and Paul's just randomly like popping his... Sorry about that, guys. My phone stopped recording for some reason. So anyway, Paul is just shooting randomly in the darkness trying to kill Alexis, and once Alexis does pop out, he's like, "Haha, you're out of bullets." And Paul's like, "Oh, no, I got one more." And just as he says that, the police kick in the door, and 3 cops like file in and just start like raining bullets down on Paul. And he kind of grabs his chest and falls away from the camera. And in the boiler that was behind him where he was standing, you can see there's like 5 bullet holes in a tight little cluster right where his heart would be. So Paul dies off screen, and essentially the plot is resolved. And Christine, after this ordeal, decides that like boring lawyer Martin is good enough for her, and they're going to be together. And instead of getting Alexis, now that he's redeemed himself, the medical attention he needs, because remember, he was only shot once in the stomach, he's kind of just laying on the couch, probably bleeding all over their expensive furniture, and he's talking to, Janet, how he's gonna, go up to heaven and be a grifter there and trick people into talking to people down to living, and basically they're joking and they're all lovey-dovey, but he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna die now." So he just kind of leans back, and the amazing Mr. X, as he's never called in this movie, has redeemed himself in the end, and then the credits roll as we sweep to a shot of the ocean outside Christine's mansion. Now, I see what y'all are probably thinking. Doesn't really sound like a horror movie. Sounds like a drama that involves a fake psychic. And I tend to agree, but on this channel, I don't plan to give a numerical system. Just basically, I recommend you watch it or I recommend you don't. So as far as this one goes, I would recommend that you watch it. It's not a horror movie in the traditional sense, but it's at 78 minutes. It's very like snappy and well paced, and overall, I found it entertaining. Uh, so seeing as how long this video is ran, I think I'm actually going to do these movies one at a time, so I can talk in depth. So I'll get the one for The Last Woman on Earth out sometime in the next 2 or 3 days, and then on that video, I'll draw the next one out of the pumpkin here as far as what we're going to do for the next review. But if you enjoyed this video, just want to thank you for watching, and want you to like the video, give me a comment, how you liked the review, what your thoughts of the movie were if you have seen it as well, and just ask you to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.